And hand over to you, Paul,
Uh,
and you're very welcome and great to see everybody here. So I leave it
uh,
to you and I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Declan. Off we go. Okay. Hi, everybody. Hope you're all keeping well, and hope you've been enjoying the course over the last kind of number of weeks. Be it maybe that you've had a little bit longer than some of the others, or that you've been doing it throughout the summer. So, but anyway, welcome back. Nice to get. I didn't get to talk to everybody the first time around. Got to talk to some of you, but not all of you directly. So, but anyway, nice to get to talk to you this morning. Um, so I'm going to jump right in because we have a lot to cover, particularly on the international side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through the mock paper. Okay, so I'm going to do that for maybe about 35 minutes. I'm going to take you through the mock paper, give you some ideas as to how to answer those questions if they were to come up in the real exam. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put away the mock paper. I'm going to take it to the real exam. But unfortunately for you guys, it's only going to be me that's going to be able to see it. But what I will do is I will go down through the real exam. I'm not going to be sharing it or anything, but I will give you some ideas as to what I would recommend covering in order to maximize your time in preparation for the real exam. Okay. So 30 to 35 minutes on the mock, give you ideas as to how to answer the questions if they come up, and then 10, 15 minutes on the real exam. Okay, so that's what I'm going to cover off this morning. Okay, so hopefully you all had a bit of a chance to have a look at the mock paper. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to cover off the short questions that are at the beginning. Okay, there's 10 short questions at the beginning, and they're worth a total of 25 marks. I'm not going to cover those off because they're fairly yes or no type answers. What I will do is I will email you guys the answers to those short questions when the session's over. It may be after the law session is over, which is immediately after this one, but I will email those to you this afternoon. And you can have a look at those and get back to me if you have any questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to spend my time on the longer questions. So to give you, because they're a bit more complex, give you a bit more of an idea as to what it is that we're looking for in those questions, if those questions were the ones to come up. Okay. So jumping right in, when we go past the short questions, the first of the long questions in the mock exam was this, a fairly short one in terms of a question. Anyway, it was outline the benefits for firms engaging in international trade. Okay, so that quite is a question that we were asking. Okay. And where you would find the information to answer this question is you would find it on pages 1 through 4 of Module 1. Okay, so this comes from Module 1. This comes from Module 1, and it's there's a little summary on page 4, very small one, but a little kind of summary on page 4, which gives you an indication as to what the benefits are for the firms involved in international trade, and then also what the benefits are for the countries involved in international trade. Okay, so just a very short little segment on page 4, but there is a little bit more detail. I think it's on the page ahead of it. I don't have it right in front of me at the moment, but I do have the details copied down. So the benefits for firms engaging in international trade are there's 5 of them called out in those pages that I've referenced. Okay, the first one is profit opportunities. Okay, if you're going to summarize the advantage of engaging in international trade in one word, it's either money or profit. Okay. But obviously, we're looking for a bit more detail than that. But the first of the benefits of engaging in international trade that's covered in the notes is profit opportunities. Okay, so compared to local businesses, international business is more profitable, and that is the case. Okay, if you're only, I mean, if you come up with some product that every single person in Ireland would want, your maximum market is maybe about 5 million people. Okay, so every man, woman, and child needs one of the products that you've come up with. The maximum market that you have there is maybe about 5 million. Okay, if you expand it, I mean, forget about the rest of the world, but if you just expand it into all of Europe, your market grows from being about 5 million to maybe somewhere in the region of 300 to 400 million. Okay, so your opportunities for profit is obviously an awful lot bigger if you go international. Second one of the benefits to firms is increased resource utilization. So imagine, I suppose, to take a couple of quick examples, imagine if you take the most Irish of products, imagine you're selling potatoes. And again, you have maximized the number of people that you can sell to in Ireland, but yet you still have a lot of stock left over. if you go international, you can turn that stock into profit. Okay, that's a stock with a limited lifespan. If you sold one that you possibly, to as many people as you possibly can in Ireland, but you still have 80% of your stock left over, if you can then go international and sell it internationally, you can turn that stock into money rather than see it just disappear. Okay. Another example might be if you create some software. The amount of time that you've spent developing software is probably the same regardless of whether you end up selling it to 5 million people or whether you end up selling it to 300 million people. So again, your opportunity to maximize your resources is there. So that's the second of the benefits to the firms. Third benefit is growth prospects. Okay, so when the market is saturated in Ireland, you may have the opportunity to go elsewhere and grow your product and grow your brand a little bit better than if you're just trying to squeeze every last euro out of it. If there's an awful lot of competition in Ireland, you will find you have to drop your prices. You have to keep your prices low, because if there's a lot of competition, your profit margins are going to be impacted. The amount of money that you can charge for your product is probably going to be impacted. If you can go somewhere where maybe there's only one or two other companies that are doing the same thing that you're doing, and if you're bigger than they are, your opportunity to maximize your profit is significantly increased. Okay, so those are the next two combined. Okay, so your opportunity for growth is a lot better if you go international, and you can have a scenario where you have less competition. You might have 10 competitors in Ireland, but if you move to France, you might find you only have 2, and you might be bigger than those 2, so you might be better able to grab more of the market share. And then the final reason for going international, that's called out in the notes, is improved business vision. So this kind of begins to link into, well, what are some of the benefits of going international for countries? Okay, so countries, the more they're trading, the more that they're working together, it's better for everybody. The better it's better for the various economies. It's better for international relations. So it begins to start flowing in. But your improved business vision, I mean, it should be that if a company is of a certain size, that they should probably have ambitions to go beyond Ireland and into. Ireland is a relatively small country, so there should be a lot of ambition to go beyond Ireland and into Europe and maybe beyond. That will have benefits not just for the company but also for the world at large. Okay, so that is the last of the reasons that are called out in the notes for going international. You may want to, if you're going for top marks after you've covered those topics, you may want to have a look at pages 12 to 18, where it covers some of the advantages of exporting, importing, licensing, franchising, things like that. You may want to briefly touch on those, but the main focus in terms of answering that question would be pages 1 to 4 in module 1, with a particular focus on module 4, because that's where you have the little summary. So before I move on to question 2, are there any questions on that? No, we're good. Okay, super. All right. So question 2, again, if I remember correctly, is a fairly short question. So short question, but certainly potentially long answer. The question 2 in the mock paper is: explain the risks of international business and what you can do to minimize them. Okay. So we'll come back to what you can do to minimize them bit in a minute. But the answer to that question in terms of what are the risks of international business, they are covered on pages 23, 24, and 25 on module 1. And there's also a recap a little bit later in module 3 on the last 10 to 12 pages of module 3. Okay, when we've gone past the cross-cultural risk and all that kind of stuff, there is a summary in module 3, which is similar to what we have in module 1. Okay, but the 4 risks in terms of doing international business are this. Okay, so you have country risk, you have currency risk, you have commercial risk, and you have cross-cultural risk. Okay, so country risk, currency risk, commercial risk, cross-cultural risk. Okay, so what are those 4 types of risk? Country risk is the basic things that you should always keep in mind. You're saying you're to invest in a particular country. How safe is it? How politically stable is it? How stable are the currencies? How stable is the economy? Can you enforce contracts if one side does not complete the what was agreed? Those type of things. Those are the things that you're looking at in terms of country risk before you decide, okay, am I going to do business in this particular country? Okay, so country risk is the first one. Okay. Second one is currency risk. Okay, so if you are crossing borders now, I mean, if you're crossing borders within the EU zone, then there is no currency risk. Okay, but if you're going to sell to a customer in America, for instance, you're going to be, they will be dealing in dollars. You are going to be dealing in euros. So you need to start asking the question, okay, is there a currency risk that I need to take into consideration? How likely is it if I give 90-day payment terms, how likely is it that the dollar to the euro exchange rate is going to be the same in 90 days as it is now? The answer is probably fairly low. But then you need to ask yourself, okay, is it likely that the dollar is going to strengthen, or is it likely the dollar is going to weaken against the euro? Okay, because that is very relevant in terms of how much money you will actually lodge in the bank when you complete the transaction. So the second one is currency risk. Third one is commercial risk, okay, and that exists with domestic, with doing business only in Ireland in the same way that it does internationally. So when we're talking about commercial risk, we're talking about a poor pricing strategy, okay, so you priced your product too high or too low. Poor marketing strategy, so you're not targeting the right people to buy your product. Maybe you've put the wrong management team in place and they're not doing a very good job. Those are the types of risks that you need to take into consideration under the heading of commercial risk. They exist in Ireland the same way they do as if you're trading internationally, but you do need to take into consideration that the laws of the land, shall we say, are different in other countries. So it may be that you may have appointed a poor management team and you want to dismiss them and put a better management team in place. That may be doable in Ireland, but it may not be doable in the country that you are doing business with. Okay, there may be laws and so on, or significant payouts that you need to do, or it may go down badly with local government, something like that. So there may be additional risks that come with doing business abroad. But the third one is commercial risk. And then the last one is cross-cultural risk. Okay, so doing the way that the Irish operate and the way the Irish do business is different to the way that it's done in most other parts of the world. Okay, in some cases, the differences are fairly minor. In other cases, the differences are fairly major. So we cover an awful lot of that off in modules 2 and 3 in terms of what cross-cultural risk is. So it may be getting off on the wrong foot because the greetings are wrong. It may be getting off on the wrong foot because the meetings are run in, shall we say, the Irish way. When if you're going to start doing business in China, you need to kind of run the meetings maybe a little bit more in the, shall we say, the Chinese way. So cross-cultural risk is the fourth of the risks that we have covered off. Okay. So how do we minimize those risks? Okay, so for country and commercial risk, the key thing is research. Okay, if you do your preparation carefully and you work out your pricing and your marketing and you get the right management team in place and you check, is the country stable? Is it secure? And if it's not stable and secure, what preparation can you put in place to make sure that you don't fall victim to large scale losses in this country? Research and preparation are the main things that I would say you need to do for country and commercial risk. For cross-cultural risk, the first things you need to do is you need to read and be very familiar with modules 2 and 3, okay, because that gives you a lot of important insight as to how to conduct a meeting if your key customer is Chinese, how to do your greetings, how a collections call should take place, what relationships should be, do you allow kind of time for socializing after the meetings, that type of stuff, okay? So a lot of that information and a lot of that risk can be avoided simply by reading modules 2 and 3, okay? And then lastly, what's the last one I have is a currency risk. For currency risk, there's a number of things you can do. We are going to cover these in a bit more detail at a later question, but just very quickly, a couple of things you can do. You can indicate in the contract, okay, for the purposes of this deal, we are going to be dealing, all payments are going to be in euro. That's one thing you can do. You can say, okay, yes, we will be dealing in dollars to euro, but for the sake of this deal, the dollar is going to be $1 is going to be worth 90 cents euro. You can set a rate with the bank that agrees that a certain rate is going to be followed, or you can, or if you're a large enough company, you can have multiple bank accounts, some of which are in dollars, some of which are in euro, and then you can decide when you move money from one account to the other. You don't need to necessarily do it on the same day that you receive payment. So there's a number of things you can do there. Okay. So a lot of detail on that. That's a long enough question. Well, short enough question, but long enough answer. Are there any questions on that? Nope. Okay, very good. Okay, so if we move on to question 3, the third question is, what are the main factors to take into account when dealing with people in different countries? Okay, so this is a recurring theme that goes all the way through module 2 and goes through most of module 3, where we have the 20 countries that hopefully at this stage you've read at least once, and you're probably a lot more familiar with than you were before you started the course. But the recurring themes that go through all 20 of those countries are this, okay? So we have talked about when talking about those 20 countries, we have discussed greetings, okay? So in some parts of the world, a greeting is a handshake. In some cases, it's a kiss on the cheek. In some cases, you bow. In some cases, the eye contact is very, very fixed. In some cases, the eye contact is very loose. So how we greet people, that's a recurring theme, and it's discussed in all 20 of those countries, okay? Basic etiquette, including do's and don'ts. Okay, so things to do and not to do in certain countries. Like such as interrupting, how to refuse things, how we treat our elders or the more senior members of the meeting. Those are some of the basic etiquettes that will vary from country to country. You will need to take into account verbal communication, okay? So people's tones and how loud or how soft they speak, and the level of their pitch and so on, those will differ from country to country. So that is covered throughout modules 2 and 3. Non-verbal communications, another one that's covered. So how is personal distance handled in certain countries? How is eye contact? How do we handle silence? In some cases, countries like the US, I think, for instance, they're not very comfortable with silence, so they'll try to fill it by talking. In other countries, silence is fine, and you should respect it rather than trying to fill it with something by talking. How meetings are conducted is another one. How collections calls are conducted, and how relationships maybe outside of work are built. In some cases, that's very, very important, and you're going to struggle to get deals over the line without investing some time in that. In other countries, it's less important, and people are less interested in doing it. But just to recap, the common themes throughout, and there's paragraphs in all 20 of the all 20 of the countries in modules 2 and 3 on this. It's greetings, basic etiquette, including do's and don'ts, verbal communication, non-verbal communication, meetings, collections calls, and relationships. Okay, those are the things that we're looking for. So we're looking for you to talk through and give some examples and some explanations as to how those would differ from one country to another. You can decide the countries, okay? Any questions on?
Sorry, Paul. Yeah, Heather here. Just on that question, how many countries would you be looking for an answer? Like, what are the main factors to take into account with the different countries? Typically, how many countries should one answer for?
I think I think in the exam we may have kind of said we may have narrowed it down and say give an example maybe of 5 different countries. Certainly no more than 5. Okay. Certainly no more than 5. If there's a certain number called out in the exam, I would obviously stick to that number. If there is none called out, I would maximize it at 5. But doing 2 or 3 fairly detailed, solid examples is probably better than doing 5 really, really quick ones. So that'd be my guidance on that.
Okay, great.
Okay. Any further questions? No. Okay. We'll jump on to number 4 then. So similar one, it's the same material. So again, for question 4, we're doing module 2 and most of module 3. The question 4 is, what are the main differences on how a meeting would be conducted? Oh, there we go. And how a meeting would be conducted in 5 countries of your choice. So in the previous question, we were saying, okay, what are all of the topics that we have covered in those modules in relation to the differences in the country? Here we have narrowed it down. We've said, okay, we're going to pick one and probably the most important of the topics, which is meetings. Okay, we're going to say, okay, within the topic of meetings, what are the subsets of categories that you need to think about if you're planning on having a meeting in? Let's stick with the example of China. Okay. So the first one is punctuality. Okay, how is punctuality? Is it a case of, okay, if the meeting is at 9 o'clock and you're there at 9 o'clock, are you going to be there entirely on your own? Or is it a case if you arrive at 5 to 9, you're going to find the room full and everybody's going to wondering how come you only arrived 5 minutes before you started? Okay, so punctuality is the first one. Okay. Is it going to be a formal or a casual meeting? Okay, if we take the example of China, it's probably going to be fairly formal. If we were to take the example of the US, for instance, while it's not necessarily going to make it any easier as a meeting, it may be fairly casual. Okay, people may address everybody by their first name and in some ways act as though they've known each other for years. Okay. Again, how to handle greetings and introductions is important. Okay, so in the US, you'll sit down, and the person to your left and the person to your right will probably kind of try tap you on the shoulder and kind of immediately introduce themselves. There may be less of that in other countries, and it'd be more appropriate for whoever's chairing the meeting to go around in a particular order to get everybody to introduce themselves. So punctuality, formal versus casual, how to handle greetings and introductions. Those are the first three. How would you handle business cards if they're provided? That would be another one. How to handle small talk. Okay, so you will find in some cultures the discussions in terms of business may already be starting while people are getting their teas and coffees. In other, it may be a case of, well, no, at the teas and coffee stage, you would only discuss people's families or the weather or sports, but not actually business. Okay, so that will vary from country to country. How you introduce yourself and how forward you should be with your successes is another key one in the US. If you don't share your successes, it may be that nobody else does. In other cultures, if you immediately kind of say, I'm so-and-so and I've done the following 3 brilliant things, it may come across as a little bit overly assertive and maybe a little bit boastful. So that would vary. And all of these things feed into how you can set the tone in terms of your business, okay, your business meeting, okay. You can probably picture it yourself. This is how you get off to shall we say, a bad start if you do the wrong thing, okay. And then the last things that we covered off in meetings is how to disagree with people and how to object. Okay, in some cases, objections in some cultures, objection is fed by kind of silence, and people don't say an awful lot, so that's how you know that they're not happy. In other cases, the objections will be fairly vocal. Okay, even if it's fairly small, and even if there's no real kind of insult taken from disagreeing. Okay, so just to recap, under the heading of meetings, what are the things we're looking out for that will differ from country to country? Punctuality, formal versus casual meetings, greetings and introductions, how to handle business cards, how to handle small talk, how forceful you are in terms of introducing yourself, and how disagreements and objections are handled. Okay. Any questions on any of that?
Paul, can I just ask you one? When answering that question, you have outlined what would be looked for. But do we list it separately for each country, or how do we format that question, the answer?
Yeah, excellent question. Let me see. I suppose in terms of the best answers I've seen over the years when that question has come up, people probably have kind of said, okay, they write down the United States and then they underline it and then they give the five or six topics. And then they've gone on to say France and they've gone on to China and so on. So the best answers have probably been that. Let's see. Sorry, hang on. I'm just kind of thinking for a moment. Actually, I would probably say that there's 5 countries, but there are probably 7 or 8 different categories. Okay, so I would probably do the United States, and then I would do all of those categories. Then I would do no, sorry, you'll have to bear with me for a moment. Sorry. I'm thinking while I'm talking. What I would probably say is this. I think I would do each category and then I would do the countries under the category. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with doing the reverse. Okay, if you're asking what my personal preference is, I think do the category and say, okay, greetings, then do France, China, US, okay, I don't know, Portugal, whatever it is. Okay, and then say and maybe even move through kind of the meeting. Greetings are towards the beginning, small talk are towards the beginning, objections are maybe later on. Kind of move through maybe the sequence of the meeting and say, okay, at this stage of the meeting, you'll see this in France, you'll see this in Spain, you'll see this in the Netherlands, or whatever it is. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with going the other way either. Okay, I'm only thinking just from simplicity point of view. I think you're probably better off having 5 large-ish kind of paragraphs where you say kind of it's I would probably do it that way. But there's nothing wrong with either. If you know your stuff, it'll be fairly clear that you do know it as you're going through it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, but good question. Okay. Any more questions on that one? Nope. Okay. Okay, if we move on to question 5. So question 5 is write a note on the 10 separate risk criteria to be included in your operational risk model. Okay, now this is covered in the risk section. So this is in module 3. Okay, it's after we've finished all the 20 countries. It's in module 3, and it is in the second section, and it is on pages 3. So about halfway down page 3, it starts. Then you have all of page 4, and you have most of page 5 as well. Okay. Now there's 10 different things asked for here, so you're not going to be able to go into too much detail on each one. Okay, so it's going to be fairly kind of make your point and move on type thing. But these are the things. This all comes under country risk. Okay, so what are the things I mentioned it earlier? What are some of the things you're going to consider under country risk? And these are the 10 things. Okay, security first of all. Okay, fairly straightforward. Okay, if your factory is going to get burnt down within a month of you setting it up, you are going to either 1, need to pick a different country, or 2, you're going to have sufficient security in place to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, so how secure is the country? That's the first thing to keep in mind. Okay, how politically stable is the country? Okay, if the likelihood is that the government that is in place at the moment may well fall within a matter of months and be replaced by a completely different government, and during the election campaigns you're going to have an element of instability and maybe not a smooth handover of power. These are things you need to keep in consideration. None of them mean you can't go ahead and do what it is that you're looking to do, but they do need to be taken into consideration. Okay. You will need to factor them into your profit margins in order to make sure that you have whatever preparation you need in place to make sure you can handle that. So political stability is the second one. Government effectiveness. Okay, let's say you have a stable government, but how effective are they? Okay, how good a job do they do of running the country? Okay, are they effective? Are they in charge? Are they in control? Okay, government effectiveness is number 3. The legal and regulatory environment. Okay, so again, as per a quick example I gave earlier, let's say you have a deal with somebody to deliver something and they fail to do it. Can you actually go to the courts and enforce it? Okay, is the legal environment conducive to bringing somebody to court and forcing them to abide by their side of the contract? The next one is macroeconomic risks. Okay, so how likely is it that you're going to have a significant crash in the economy of the country that you're going to be working in? Could there be a devaluation coming, something like that, in terms of the currency? How strong is the economy? How predictable is the behavior of the economy? And there are agencies out there such as Moody's who can give you some good steering as to how things are going in the country, even if you yourself aren't an expert in that particular country. Foreign trade and payment issues are the next one. Okay, so one I've experienced myself. There will be, in times of trouble, there will be countries that will reduce the amount of money that can leave the country at any one time. Okay, so it might be that a customer is willing to pay you the $1 million that they owe you, but they might say, well, I unfortunately the government is restricting us. We can only make payments of €10,000 a day and no more. Okay. 10,000 a day when you're owed $1 million, it's going to take a while for that debt to be cleared. Okay, so that's the next one to keep in mind. Labor markets. Okay, can you find the talent that you're going to be looking for in the country? If you can find the talent, is the country potentially a very unionized country? How powerful are the unions in the country? Are they likely to stop work on a regular basis? So those are things you need to keep in consideration. And then the last three are financial risks. So how easy is it or hard is it to get finance in the country? Tax policy, okay, how favorable is that country to foreign investment? Some countries are very favorable, like Ireland, for instance, are very favorable to foreign investment. Say, right, come one, come all, and we will make it relatively easy for you to do business here because we will recoup tax dollars by through income tax of the employees that you hire. But there's other countries that are less keen on that and would rather that it is countries who are from their own country that actually provide most of the employment to their citizens. So what sort of tax policy is it? And then finally, infrastructure. Okay, does the country have sufficient, a good enough road network that you can move goods from A to B? Is the broadband strong in the country so that you're not going to have drops on a regular basis? So those are the 10 things that you would include in your operational risk model. So just to repeat them, security, political stability, government effectiveness, legal and regulatory environment, macroeconomic risks, foreign trade and payment issues, labor markets, financial risks, tax policy, and the standard of local infrastructure. So what we're looking for there, and all of that information is on pages 3, 4, and 5 in the second part of module 3. What we're looking for there is for you to list those 10 and give us a quick explanation in your own words of what it is that each of them are. Any questions on any of that? Okay, I will take the opportunity. It's I know I'm just doing a kind of sidebar here for a moment, but it is very, very important. It is key to remember on the just in case I don't say it later on. It's key to remember on the long questions, this is not a scavenger hunt, okay? What we're not looking for you to find the relevant section and say, okay, good, now I copy page 3 and page 4 and page 5 and I paste it into my answer and said, there you go, Paul, you wanted an operational risk model, there's an operational risk model. Okay, that's not what we're looking for because it doesn't show that you understand or that you've that you would be able to talk in detail on these topics outside of the exam. What we are looking for you to do is we're looking for you to find the information, but also to reword it, put examples in, put it in your own words, show us that you understand the material that we've shared with you, okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with copying and pasting on the first section, okay? Okay, the short questions, because the questions are either kind of right or wrong. So there's nothing wrong with doing that, okay? That's fine. By all means, do a little copying and pasting there. That's fine. But on the longer questions, you know, we have had people before who just give us kind of pages of notes, which are Declan's notes, okay? You know, Declan and I know what's in the notes, okay? It's not, but the problem is it doesn't show any indication that you understand the material, okay? All right, so that's just important to mention. So I'm running a bit tight on time, so I better move on to the next one. The next one is question 6, which is on currency risk. So the question on question 6 is explain with examples the effect foreign exchange risks can have on transactions over time, okay? And this is covered in pages 7 to 8 of module 3 in the risk section. So again, we're on to the last part of module 3. So we're finished with the 20 countries. There's information after that, but one of them is on pages 7 and 8, and it's on currency risk. And basically, what we're looking for here is the example that's given in the notes. Let me just see if I can quickly share a screen that might help. I can never find this I'm looking for. Is there more? Or is it? Yeah. No, hang on, I have it. Okay. Are you able to see? Something up on the screen? Which hopefully says the word example.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this is lifted directly from the notes, so you can go and consult this yourself in your own time. Okay, but it's just a good example here that says, okay, if you agree to buy 1,000 items for $20 each to be delivered next month, if the exchange rate for the dollar is 91 cents euro to the US dollar, then purchasing those products is going to cost you 18,200 euro. Okay. And then if you add a 5% profit margin, which is the reason that you're going to be in business, that is going to you're then going to sell the goods for 19,110 euro, and that's going to give you a profit of 920 euro. Okay. So that's this section here. Okay. All right. So That's when it is 91 cents to the US dollar. Okay. Let's say the dollar strengthens. Okay. And it is now 97 cents to the US dollar. The price of the goods increases to 19,400. Okay, so that's what you're now going to have to pay to do it. Remember, you've applied a 5% profit margin, so this is what you're going to be charging your customers, which is 19,110. You have now lost 290 euros on the transaction. Okay, so at 91 cents to the dollar, you're making a profit of 900 euro. When it strengthens to 97, and this does happen, okay, when the dollar strengthens to all the way up to 97, you are now looking at a loss of 290 euro. If you want to take a more positive example, which is here, if the dollar has fallen and is now quite weak, if it's only worth 85 cents to the euro, that's only going to cost you 17,000 to make your purchase. Okay, you're going to apply your profit and you're going to sell it for 19,110. You are now going to make a profit of 2,110 euro on your transaction. So to summarize, at 85, when the dollar is worth 85 cents, you're looking at a profit of a bit over 2,000 euro. If it strengthens to 91, which is up here, you're now looking at a profit. You're still getting profit, but it's been halved, so it's now only at 910 euro. And then if it goes all the way up to 97 cents, you're now looking at a loss of 290 euro. Okay. So this question, I'll give you a heads up. This question is not on the exam, okay? But if it were on the exam, this is the type of example we'd be looking for, okay? All right. Now, as I said earlier, there's a couple of things you can do to minimize that, so that this doesn't become an issue. If you're a large company, you can have a dollar and a euro account, and maybe other ones. Okay, so that's certainly something I've seen in action in real life before. You can also agree with your customers that, okay, listen, for the purposes of this transaction, we're only dealing in euro. You're going to pay me in euro. I know you're over in the US, but you're going to pay me in euro. That's the way we're going to do business. Okay, that's the second one. So then it doesn't happen. All right. The third scenario is that you can agree in the contract and say, okay, for the purposes of this contract, the US dollar to euro exchange rate is 90 cents to the dollar. Okay, that way, if there's a significant change, they still have to pay you the correct amount, so you're not impacted. And then the final way of doing it is you can speak to your bank and you say, okay, I'm expecting $1 million to come in about 90 days time. I would like to fix a rate with you that says, so the bank then takes on the risk rather than the scenario. The bank may make money out of it. The bank may lose money out of it, but it's going to be the bank that takes the hit or makes the profit rather than you. You can be a bit more certain that you are expecting $1 million to come in 90 days time, and you will actually get $1 million. Okay. Okay, we have two questions left. I'm only going to cover one, okay, in the interest of time, because the last one's on the legal side of things, which you have all covered off in your in assignments anyway. So the last question that I'm going to cover off in the mock one, and then we're going to go on to the real one. I might go around 5 minutes late, but hopefully it's not too bad, is question 7. So the question is, discuss the advantages and disadvantages of the 4 main collection options open to large multinational companies, okay? And these are covered on pages 3 to 6 in module 4, okay? So this is basically asking the question saying, okay, you've gone ahead and you've decided you're going to engage in international business. How are you going to collect the money that you are going to be owed from your customers? Okay, and your options are: you can either do all of it in the customer's country. Okay, so you set up your team of collectors there. Option 2 is you can set up a shared services center. So let's say you go into multiple countries and you're now all across Europe. You could set up a shared services center, potentially, for instance, in Ireland, and you could do all your collections there. You have a French team and a Spanish team and a German team and an Italian team who do all the collections for you. Third option is you split it. You have some of your collectors here in Ireland, but you also have people locally. The advantage of that potentially is that they can go and visit the customer, or you can do what my employer Accenture would love you to do, which is outsource it to a third party like us, and we do the collections for you. Okay, so that's a fourth option. Okay. The advantages, just quickly in terms of doing it, if you do it in the customer's own country, you're going to have good local knowledge, and you should have very little of the of cross-cultural risk involved. Because chances are, if you're basing your collectors in France, you're probably going to hire actual French people to do the collections for you. Okay, so your cross-cultural risk is essentially nil. It can also make it easier for them to go and travel. Okay, they can go and meet the customers if they're based in France. It's you're not involving planes. You might be involving more trains and taxis rather than a scenario of having to fly people in and book them hotels and things like that. So it's easier to go and visit your customers. It's also easier to build the relationships with the other, with sales, with marketing and operations. So you can get things like your credit notes done a bit faster, and you can have a smoother process where maybe you don't need credit notes at all. Okay, so all of that is easier when everybody's in the same country. Okay. The disadvantages are it might be a bit slower in terms of knowledge sharing that you have in a shared service model. So I mean, I've worked in shared service centers in Dublin. If the French team got a good idea, that would be shared with the German team and the Spanish team and the Italian team. So knowledge sharing was all across Europe. It makes it a little bit harder to share the knowledge. The management support and the IT support might be a little bit weaker if you have it, because you may not be talking about, if you have a team of collectors that is maybe 20 collectors, that's going to be a good strong team, and they'll probably have their own manager who is full-time on that. If there's only maybe 2 collectors, whoever's managing them will probably also be doing something else. So the actual management support that's there might be a bit reduced. Okay. If you go the shared service model, as I said, better knowledge sharing because everyone's potentially in the same building, better management support, better IT support. I mean, over the years when I was doing this in Dublin, we got the best of everything in terms of the IT packages and so on. They're probably going to be rolled out a bit slower if it's only 2 collectors here, 2 collectors there, and they're all scattered across Europe. You have cost savings in terms of office space because everyone's together, and better team synergy. As I said, the French team will share stuff with the German team, who will share with the Italian team, and things like that. Okay. If you combine the 2 formats and you have some people based in Ireland, but you also have some people based locally, it can give a bit of agility because the people locally can do the visits, and maybe the people here can do maybe the lower value kind of collections, because it can be done remotely and it's not going to justify it. You can cover bank holidays a bit easier. Things like that, but you may have less synergy. I've certainly found that over the years. It becomes a little bit more us and them, and it can be more costly because you have 2 sets of offices. Okay, and then finally, if you do the outsourcing model, can be good because the expertise can come from whoever it is that's going to offer the outsourcing model, and it can be a bit more cost effective because some companies do a no-win, no-fee type model. But the downside of it is you may lose the relationship with the customer, because if you're hiring somebody who maybe cares a bit less about your brand and so on because it's not their brand, they may push the customer a little bit too hard when it comes to things like collections. Disputes can be harder to resolve, things like that. Okay. So that was a little bit speedier than I maybe liked for question 7, but that's what we have on question 7. Any questions on that before I get to the real exam? No. Okay. The real exams, really the important bit in terms of listening. So just to repeat, I'm going to skip over number 8. Number 8 is legal systems. You have done that as part of your second assignment, and it's not on the exam anyway. Okay. So I'm skipping over number 8 because we'd be here for a lot longer if we have to cover those out. So in terms of the real exam, so same structure. You have the 10 short questions, okay, which are worth 2.5 points each, so a total of 25 questions. Not 25 questions, 25 points. Okay, there are 10 questions. There were 2.5 points each for a maximum of 25 marks. That is the first section. Okay, all right, and they'll primarily be focused, not only, but a lot of it is more towards kind of module 1. Okay, that's where you'll find a lot of the shorter ones. Okay, not only, but that's where a lot of it is kind of focused. Okay. Now, in terms of the long questions, again, there's 8 questions and you have to do 3 of them. Okay, and they're each worth 25 marks. So that gives you the remaining 75. Okay. So 25 for section 1, which are the short questions, 25 for each of the 3 longer questions that you're going to do. Okay. Now, what's in those longer questions? So question 1 is from module 1, and it is very similar to one of the questions on the mock paper. Okay. So you could do worse than have another look back at the mock paper and say, okay, which ones are from module 1 on the mock paper, and know those very well. If you know those very well, you're going to be in good shape to answer question 1. Question 2 is also from module 1, and it's related to the various modes of entry into international business. Okay, so your modes of entry are things like exporting, importing, franchising, those type of things. Okay, so if you know that pretty well, again, I repeat, we're not looking for copy paste. Okay, but if you know those well and you can explain them in your own words, and you can maybe throw in an example or two, that would have you in good shape to answer question 2. Question 3 is from module 2 and 3. Okay, so this is the sections where we cover off the 20 countries. And we ask you, okay, so we explain to you, how do you greet people? How do you do collections calls? How do you do all that stuff in 20 countries? So we're asking you, discuss how you would approach something differently in 5 countries of your choice. Okay. All right, so just to quickly repeat what those type of things are, is if I can just find it, just bear with me 1 minute, because it is earlier up on my paper. Okay, so the type of things we're looking for is, how are greetings going to be different in 5 countries? What are the do's and don'ts in 5 different countries? How would you handle verbal communication in 5 different countries? How would you handle non-verbal communication? How do you conduct meetings maybe? How do you conduct phone calls? How do you handle relationships outside of work? Basically all the answers that I gave you for the earlier question that was on the mock paper. I think it was question 3, okay? And I will remind you, this is recorded, okay? So you can play this back, okay? Even if you miss stuff as we've been going along, you can play this back, okay? So that's what we're looking for. How would you approach something differently in 5 countries of your choice? That's question 3 on the real paper. Question 4 also comes from modules 2 and 3. Again, it's from the 20 countries, okay? And it's very similar to a question on the mock paper. So again, I think there's 3 questions on the mock paper. Is it 2 or is it 3? 2 or 3 questions from the mock paper that cover off those 20 countries. If you could answer those, and you could, do a test run maybe, and kind of, time yourself and see how well you could answer one of those questions just on your, just as an example. But knowing how to do that will have you in good shape for question 4. Okay. So just look at the questions that come from the 20 countries in the mock paper, know how to do those, and you're in good shape to do question 4. Okay. And then question 5 is pretty much pretty much exactly the same. My guidance is exactly the same as it is for question 3. Again, it's from modules 2 and 3. Again, it's from the top 20 countries, and it's how you would do something differently in 5 countries of your choice. So question 3 could be about meetings. Question 5 could be about phone calls. Question 3 could be about greetings, and question 5 could be about non-verbal communication, something like that. Okay. All right, but there's 3 of them there. So it's question 3, question 4, and question 5. All of them relate to the top 20 countries. So in theory, if you really liked those modules, you could just learn off the stuff from the top 20 countries, be very familiar with it, and you'd be able to answer those 3 questions, and that would have you done. You'd have a lack of choice, but those are 3 questions. Those 3 questions you could in theory just do it, and that's your exam done. Question 6 is from module 3, and it's from the sections that you have finished, after we've finished discussing the top 20 countries. And again, it is very similar to one of the mock exams. So if you know the mock exam very well, you could answer question 6, and you could also, as I said earlier, have a good go at answering question 1 as well. So just by looking at the mock paper in good detail, you will be in good shape to answer 2 of the 3 long questions that you need to do. So you can see here how you can narrow things down quite a bit, quite quickly, okay? And then question 7 and question 8, the guidance on those is both the same. Both of them are from module 4, okay? In some ways, it's a fairly straightforward module because none of it gets too detailed, because you by the time you start seeing detail, you move on to something else. And it's not the legal systems, okay? The legal systems are, we're finished with that because we've covered it off in assignment 2, okay? It's not the legal systems, it's something else. So if you did module 4 and only did module 4, you again could be in good shape to answer 2 out of the 3 questions that you need to do. Okay. So a little bit of quick guidance, and then I'll open up to questions. I'm conscious we're a little bit over time, so apologies for that. A little bit of quick guidance, because 1 or 2 people have approached me and kind of said, okay, a little bit nervous on this. To repeat what I've said, 2 of the questions on the real exam are very similar to the mock. So one thing you can do to prepare is know the mock exam very well. 3 of the questions are from the top 20 countries. Okay, so that gives you options there. Okay, if you only study the top 20 countries, you will be a bit limited. I mean, if you see something in the question and say, "Ugh, I don't really like that," you won't really have an option to go anywhere else. But if you only study those, you'll be in good position to answer 3 questions, and that's the 3 questions that you need to do. Okay. And to repeat, this is recorded, okay? So if you want to potentially go back, particularly in relation to the mock paper, if you want to go back and replay some of the information and some of the tips I've given you as have gone along, then you can do that. But the key things I would say is copying and pasting is not what we're looking for. Examples do prove that you know what you're talking about. And putting things in your own words also shows that you know what you're talking about. That's ultimately what we're looking for. We're looking for evidence that you've learned the material that we've been sharing with you. So I'm going to go quiet now, but I'm going to throw it open to the floor and see if any of you have any questions.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Sue. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to ask what the timings are for the ICM. Are they similar to the collections? You know, for the 10 questions in the hour, and then how you told us about how much time there is to apply to each question, 25 minutes.
Yeah, that's about right, Jacqueline, isn't it? I mean, you've 2 hours and you get the whole paper, isn't that right?
Yeah. So I would suggest half an hour on the 10 questions, and then hold on, there's 3 questions to be answered.
Yeah.
And then half an hour on each of the 3 questions. Yeah. And so if you ran with your sort of 25 minutes, you know, then that gives you sort of 10 minutes at the end to review and to polish it off and do all that kind of good stuff. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And when your time is up, stop and move on to the next question, because you've got most of the marks at this stage. All right. Now, the other thing that I will say that we haven't covered off yet, and that is that if the opposite happens, where you have loads of time, so you've answered the 3 questions, or you know, the long questions to your own satisfaction, you may answer another question. Are you with me? So in, say, collections where you've 2 questions to answer, if you answer a third, what we will do is we will mark all 3 and we will give you the best 2. Is that okay? So now 2 good answers are better than 3 bad answers. But if you have answered your 2 questions, and in the long questions for international, you've answered your 3 questions and you're happy, and you still have half an hour left, have a go at a 4th. And you know, if whichever 3 are your highest marks, that's the marks you'll be given. Is that okay? Okay, listen, Paul, thanks a million. I'm going to stop the recording for the international section.